Captain Alina Ward had faced enemy fire before, but nothing tightened her chest like the sound of her own name spoken in that tone, flat, official, already decided. Captain Ward, effective immediately. You are relieved of duty. The words echoed inside the cramped command office, bouncing off concrete walls stained with years of dust and sweat. The base commander didn't look at her when he spoke. He kept his eyes fixed on the paperwork in front of him, as if reading it aloud would somehow absolve him of responsibility. Alina stood at attention, spine straight, jaw locked. Outside, generators hummed and helicopters came and went like the base's pulse hadn't just skipped a beat. This action is taken due to repeated insubordination, failure to follow command protocol, and conduct unbecoming an officer, the commander continued. Your access credentials are revoked. You will turn in your weapon and report to transport within the hour. Insubordination. That was the word they always used when someone refused to look away. Yes, sir, Alina replied evenly. The commander finally glanced up, irritation flashing across his face. You may go. She turned sharply and walked out, boots striking the concrete with controlled precision. Only once the door shut behind her did the murmurs begin. Staff officers avoided her gaze. A lieutenant she'd mentored stared at his tablet like it suddenly required his full attention. The message was clear. Distance yourself. Association was dangerous. Alina moved through the corridor with purpose, even as her mind raced. It had happened faster than she expected. 2 weeks earlier, she'd noticed discrepancies in the logistics manifests, small at first. A crate marked as damaged that never arrived for inspection. Serial numbers that didn't match weapon registries. At a base like this, mistakes happened, but patterns didn't lie. She'd brought it up during a closed briefing, calmly, professionally. The room had gone quiet. The commander had smiled and thanked her for her initiative. The next day, her reports started bouncing back unsigned. By the third day, she was locked out of systems she'd managed for years. Now this. Alina entered her quarters and shut the door, exhaling slowly. The space was sparse, bed, footlocker, desk. No personal photos. She learned early not to get attached. She opened her locker and began packing with methodical precision. Uniforms folded the same way she always did, medals tucked away without ceremony. Her hands didn't shake. What shook her was the certainty that she'd been right. She knelt and unzipped her duffel bag, fingers brushing the seam she'd reinforced months ago. Inside, hidden beneath the fabric, was a slim encrypted drive. No markings, no serials. 3 hours ago, that drive had changed hands digitally. She remembered the hesitation before pressing send. The channel she'd used wasn't in any manual. It was a verbal instruction given to her years earlier during a joint exercise she technically wasn't supposed to remember. If you ever see something that can't be fixed from the inside, the man had told her, not giving his name, you send it here. But understand, if you do, your life will get very uncomfortable very fast. He hadn't been wrong. Alina zipped the bag and slung it over her shoulder. Outside, the midday sun hammered the base. Heat shimmered off armored vehicles. Life went on. Soldiers laughed near the chow hall. A group played cards on an overturned crate. To them, this was just another officer rotating out. It happened all the time. As she crossed the yard, she spotted Major Collins leaning against a Humvee, watching her. He didn't wave. Collins had signed off on half the shipments she'd questioned. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw tightened. Good, she thought, he knows. She reached the motor pool and sat on a low barrier, setting her duffel at her feet. Officially, she was to wait for ground transport. Unofficially, she suspected they wanted her gone quietly. No scene, no questions. Minutes passed. Then 20. The longer she waited, the more tension crept into the air. Radios crackled with clipped exchanges. Air traffic control called out routine updates, then paused mid-sentence. Static. Say again, a controller snapped. Elena frowned slightly. The wind shifted, carrying a distant sound she recognized instantly. Rotor wash. Not the familiar thrum of supply birds, this was deeper, heavier, purposeful. Conversations died mid-word. Soldiers looked up. The sound grew louder, faster than expected, as if whatever was approaching didn't care for formalities. Elena, a sergeant muttered nearby, squinting at the sky. You expecting a ride? She didn't answer. Over the ridgeline, a helicopter crested into view, low, aggressive, matte black against the sky. No markings, no visible ID numbers. It flew straight toward the base without requesting clearance. That aircraft is not on the schedule, air traffic control barked over loudspeakers, panic bleeding through professionalism. The helicopter didn't respond. Sirens wailed as the base shifted instinctively toward lockdown procedures. Guards moved to defensive positions. Officers shouted conflicting orders. The Blackhawk descended hard into the landing zone, kicking up a storm of dust and debris. The side door slid open before it touched down. Men jumped out. Not regular infantry. Their movements were too precise, too fluid. Weapons up, scanning, controlling space in seconds. Faces obscured, gear worn and used, not parade clean. The base commander stormed forward, red-faced. Who the hell authorized this landing? He demanded. One of the operators raised a gloved hand. The commander stopped. Not because he was ordered to, but because something in that gesture said he would regret taking another step. The team leader removed his helmet just enough to reveal sharp eyes and a calm expression. We're here for Captain Elena Ward, he said evenly. The world seemed to tilt. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. That's her, someone said. Elena stood slowly, heart pounding now despite her discipline. Every instinct told her this moment mattered more than anything she'd faced before. She stepped forward. I'm Captain Ward. The team leader studied her, then nodded once, almost respectfully. Ma'am, he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear, you pushed the right button. Behind her, the commander's face drained of color. Elena glanced back at the base, the flags, the buildings, the people who had written her off an hour ago. Then she turned toward the Blackhawk. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end of her career. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Elena followed the SEAL team leader across the landing zone, the dust swirling around them like a curtain of fate. The Blackhawk's engines roared, drowning out the murmurs of stunned soldiers, yet somehow the moment felt eerily quiet. She could feel every eye on her. The base that had just expelled her now seemed paralyzed. Officers froze in mid-step, soldiers gripping their weapons a little too tightly, whispers crawling along the edges of the dust cloud like insects. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the chest and demanded attention. As they approached the helicopter, the team leader stopped and glanced at her. Captain Ward, before we move, you need to understand what you're stepping into. Everything you thought you knew about this base, the command, even your mission, it's been compromised. His voice was low but steady, carrying authority without arrogance. Elena nodded, a flicker of adrenaline running through her veins. She had suspected as much, but hearing confirmation made it real. Who are you working for? She asked. Not out of defiance, but because she needed context. Every instinct in her military training screamed caution. In situations like this, clarity could be the difference between survival and becoming a casualty. Not who, he corrected, scanning the horizon with eyes that missed nothing. Where? You've activated channels that few people on the planet know exist, channels that are supposed to remain silent unless the situation is critical, and right now it is. Elena's hand instinctively went to the duffel bag slung across her shoulder. Inside, the encrypted drive pulsed with the lifeblood of her investigation, the proof of the weapons pipeline she had uncovered. For months, her reports had been dismissed, buried, and ultimately ignored. She had risked everything when she sent the data through the old contact channel. She hadn't just sent information, she had lit a fuse. The team leader's gaze followed hers, sharp and assessing. That drive you sent, it didn't go unnoticed, and now, because of that, the base you just left is under observation. Alina's stomach tightened. Observation wasn't enough. If this situation was as severe as he implied, it meant the people who wanted her silenced were still operational. Somewhere out there, someone powerful was watching every move, ready to close the trap. She swallowed hard and nodded. So, my expulsion didn't do what they thought it would. No, he said, voice calm but edged with gravity. It only confirmed the threat, and it put you in a position where you can actually help contain it. They reached the Blackhawk and she stepped inside, nodding. The interior was stripped down for operations, not comfort. The seats were functional, restraints tight, and the air smelled faintly of oil and ozone. A faint hum vibrated through the cabin as the rotors spun, ready for takeoff. She secured her seat, the duffel on the floor at her feet, and buckled in. The Blackhawk lifted with a roar, and the base beneath her shrank to a patch of concrete and sand. Dust spiraled around abandoned vehicles and tents as the aircraft gained altitude. Alina could barely make out the bewildered expressions of soldiers left behind, frozen in a moment that would soon vanish from memory. Inside, the cabin was tense, almost silent. Operators checked their gear, eyes never resting, movements precise and practiced. Alina observed them closely, noting insignias, equipment, posture, all signs of elite training. SEALs, naval special warfare operators. Her heart rate quickened. She'd faced danger before, but never like this. Never at the scale that seemed to hum in the air around her. Why me? She finally asked, breaking the silence. The team leader exhaled, his eyes briefly meeting hers. Because you saw it, you acted, you didn't wait for permission. Most people would have turned a blind eye. Most people are still turning blind eyes. He leaned back slightly, voice dropping. We don't make mistakes like that, not anymore, not when the consequences are this severe. Alina's mind raced. She thought of Major Collins, of the base commander, of every officer who had dismissed her concerns. She had been labeled insubordinate, a troublemaker, a risk to cohesion. And now, within hours, she realized that her expulsion had been irrelevant. The true power at play wasn't interested in administrative punishment. They were interested in stopping the corruption she had uncovered, and they had recognized her as essential to that mission. As the Blackhawk banked slightly over the desert, she caught sight of a convoy of unmarked vehicles moving toward the base she had just left. They weren't ordinary military vehicles. Their speed, coordination, and silence suggested covert operations. Something was happening. Orders were being executed. Real consequences were unfolding, and she was flying straight toward them. The operators around her didn't speak, but their presence was enough. Alina felt the weight of experience in every movement. One of them, younger, with eyes sharp as a hawk, checked weapons and comms repeatedly, hands steady. She realized these men were professionals in the truest sense, people who operated on instinct and training alone, whose authority came from capability rather than rank. The team leader finally spoke again. You need to understand, Captain. What you uncovered isn't just a paperwork error. It's a pipeline that has been moving weapons from our supply chains into the hands of enemies. People we trust are involved, and if we don't act quickly, it could compromise operations across the globe. Alina's chest tightened further. She had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed made the threat real. She had been ignored when it mattered most, but she was still alive, and now, by some twist of fate, in the center of the response. Then what's my role? She asked, her voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline. You're going to help us understand the layout of the compromise, the leader said, voice clipped, efficient. You know the manifests, the supply lines, the weak points. You know the people who should have been stopped months ago. Your knowledge is the only thing that can allow us to contain this." Alina's mind shifted into operational mode. She pictured the base she had just left, the routines, the complacency, the blind obedience that had allowed corruption to fester. Every detail she had noted, every file she had read, every shipment she had logged, now it had purpose. Now it mattered. As the helicopter banked westward toward an undisclosed location, Alina felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She had been expelled, dismissed, told she had no place in the military system she had devoted her life to. And yet here she was, part of something far larger than herself, flying toward a mission that could change the course of her career, or end it. The team leader spoke one final time before silence fell again. "Captain Ward, everything you thought you knew about loyalty, command, and duty is about to be tested. We don't operate in the daylight. We don't wait for permission. We move, we act, we contain. You're going to see the system from a perspective very few ever do, and when you do, you'll understand why they expelled you." Alina stared out the open side of the Blackhawk, wind whipping past, the desert a vast sea of sand below. She thought of the soldiers back at her base, unaware that their routines were about to be disrupted in ways they would never understand. She thought of her mentor who had given her the channel instructions, the one she hadn't contacted in years. She thought of Major Collins and the commander who had tried to silence her. And she understood. Expulsion didn't mean failure. It meant survival. And survival didn't just come from following orders. It came from understanding the stakes, seeing the threats no one else saw, and acting when everyone else hesitated. The Blackhawk leveled, engines humming a steady rhythm. Alina's hand brushed the duffel bag at her feet. Inside was proof, leverage, and perhaps a target painted on her back. But she didn't flinch. She had been through fire before. She had faced impossible choices before. This time, she had allies she hadn't even known existed. As the aircraft sped toward its destination, Alina felt a strange calm settle over her. The world she had known was gone. The rules she had relied on were gone. The base that expelled her, already irrelevant. All that mattered now was the mission ahead, the secrets she carried, and the shadowy team that had just declared without hesitation that she mattered. For the first time in hours, Alina allowed herself a small, sharp smile. They had thought they were silencing her. They were wrong. And in a few minutes she would find out just how wrong. The Blackhawk roared through the sky, black as a storm cloud slicing through the desert heat. Alina leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the base shrinking behind them. The wind whipping past the open side door carried the scent of dust, oil, and adrenaline. Every instinct she possessed screamed that nothing about this flight was normal, yet she stayed calm. Training kicked in. Focus. Observe. Anticipate. Beside her, the SEAL operators moved with quiet precision, adjusting gear, checking weapons, communicating silently through hand signals. Their faces were grim, their eyes sharp as knives. Each man and woman aboard carried the weight of experience, decades of missions, some classified, most never spoken of. And now they had her, the expelled officer whose insight had inadvertently triggered this extraordinary response. The team leader, tall, broad-shouldered, and radiating authority, glanced at her briefly. "You need to understand," he said, voice low but firm, "this flight isn't just a pickup. It's a containment operation. Everything you reported, the discrepancies, the missing manifests, the pipeline, has reached a critical level. Your expulsion didn't stop it. It accelerated it." Alina's pulse quickened. She had anticipated resistance, maybe surveillance, maybe sabotage. But this was escalation. She had been expelled, ignored, dismissed, and now she was being flown to an unknown location by a covert SEAL team, carrying evidence powerful enough to disrupt operations across multiple continents. "Where are we going?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral, controlled. The leader didn't answer immediately. Instead, he nodded toward the digital maps projected on a tablet secured to the cabin wall. Red dots blinked rapidly across the screen, unmarked facilities, convoys, and checkpoints she recognized instantly from her previous assignments. The dots weren't random. They traced a path, a pipeline. "Each red dot represents an active threat," he said finally. "Each one of them is connected to your data. The moment you sent that drive, alarms went off in places you can't imagine. This isn't just about one base. It's about containment across multiple regions. You're coming with us because you're the only one who can navigate it." Alina stared at the map, the connections, the scope of what she had unleashed. Her stomach tightened, not from fear but from realization. The problem she had discovered months ago, the one that got her expelled, wasn't localized. It was global, and the people responsible weren't just negligent officers. They were deliberate, organized, and ruthless. A younger operator seated across from her caught her gaze and offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a silent acknowledgement. Alina returned it, feeling an odd kinship. These were people who didn't need to speak to communicate. She would have to learn quickly if she wanted to survive. The Blackhawk banked slightly, tilting the horizon, and dust swirled far below. She saw the base she had called home for years, now tiny and chaotic, soldiers moving like ants, oblivious to the invisible forces that had just been set into motion. Her expulsion had seemed final at the time, but now she understood. It had been irrelevant. The real consequences were happening elsewhere. Then the comms crackled, a coded transmission almost inaudible under the roar of the rotors. The team leader tapped a headset, eyes narrowing. "They're tracking us," he said calmly. "Nothing we haven't prepared for, but it confirms the presence of hostile elements within the network. We'll encounter resistance." Alina's mind raced. Resistance. Inside the U.S. military, on her former base. The thought should have frightened her, but adrenaline sharpened her focus. She had always been good under pressure, trained to identify weak points and exploit them. Now those skills were more than valuable. They were essential. The Blackhawk descended rapidly over an unmarked compound she didn't recognize. Concrete walls surrounded by reinforced fencing and guard towers. No flags, no markings, just a perimeter that screamed secrecy. This was their destination, a staging ground, she realized, for the containment operation. Inside the cabin, the team prepared for insertion. Harnesses secured, weapons checked, silent commands exchanged. Alina's pulse raced. She had seen jump drills, insertion exercises, simulations, but never in a real mission where failure could mean death. The team leader crouched near her. "Listen closely. Once we touch down, we move fast. You're not just a passenger, you're our eyes inside the system. Identify weak links. Help us target corrupt operators. Keep your head, follow orders. Survival depends on discipline." Alina nodded, every nerve alive. Understood. The landing was brutal. The Blackhawk's skids kicked up dirt, debris, and small rocks. The sudden stop jolted everyone and the doors swung open. Desert wind hit like a physical force, stinging eyes and skin. Outside, the compound was quiet, but Alina knew better. Silence often preceded chaos. The SEAL team flowed out first, covering the perimeter with weapons raised, scanning every corner. Alina followed under the watchful eye of her escort, clutching her duffel and mentally mapping exits, choke points, and potential threats. Her mind worked automatically, cataloging every detail as she had trained for years to do. They entered the compound through a side gate, undetected. Inside, the scene was stark. Rooms filled with monitors, communications equipment, and digital maps showing pipelines, manifests, and personnel movements. Analysts and operators worked in silence, responding to encrypted comms, deploying assets in real time. The team leader approached a central console. "This is where we coordinate containment," he said. "You'll work with these analysts. They'll feed you intel and you'll help validate it against what you know. The faster we act, the less chance for corruption to spread." Alina placed the duffel on a table and unzipped it. The drive sat there, a small black rectangle holding the key to months of investigation, proof of what she had witnessed and leverage that could topple careers, or worse, lives. She handed it to the lead analyst, who inserted it into a secure terminal. Within seconds, encrypted files began decrypting. Lines of data scrolled across the monitors, revealing discrepancies, hidden shipments, and unauthorized transfers. Names she had suspected appeared in red. Evidence that had been buried, ignored, and dismissed now illuminated the room like a warning flare. Alina felt a mix of vindication and dread. The threats were worse than she imagined. The network of corruption reached far beyond her base. People in positions of authority had manipulated logistics, falsified reports, and endangered lives for profit. And if they realized their exposure, they would act violently, decisively. The team leader watched her, expression unreadable. "Captain, this is just the beginning. Every shipment, every transfer, every compromised individual, we target them in sequence. No mistakes. Containment must be clean, fast, silent." Alina nodded, scanning the data. Already plans were forming in her mind. Routes, weak points, personnel schedules. She could see how operations at her former base had been manipulated. Now she could help dismantle it, save lives, and prevent further chaos. A calm alert sounded, a red icon blinking on the main display. The team leader's eyes narrowed. "We have movement," he said. "They've noticed activity at the first target location. Extraction and containment teams are ready. You'll assist in guiding them, ensuring success." Alina felt her pulse spike. This was real. Not drills, not simulations, not paperwork battles. Real people were at risk. Real decisions had to be made in seconds, and now she was part of it. The operators moved with synchronized precision. Alina observed, cataloging, learning their signals, their silent commands, their methods. She felt a strange thrill, a recognition that her skills were not just useful but vital. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Updates streamed in, teams deployed, targets identified. The first strike point was secured, evidence gathered, suspects contained without alerting others. Alina's input, her knowledge of manifests, personnel, and schedules, had allowed the team to move decisively. By nightfall, the compound was quiet again. The operation had succeeded, at least in the first phase. Alina stood near a monitor, sweat and dust clinging to her skin, adrenaline still coursing. She finally allowed herself a breath. The SEAL team leader approached. "Good work, Captain. Today, you proved why you're here. This mission is far from over, but without your insight, we would have failed." Alina's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what had transpired. She had been expelled, dismissed, told she didn't belong. And yet, in 3 short hours, she had become essential to a mission that could save countless lives. She glanced at the monitors, at the names, the pipelines, the threads of corruption. The path ahead was dangerous, unpredictable, lethal. But for the first time in her life, she felt in control, not by rank, not by protocol, but by knowledge, by instinct, and by courage. And as the desert night fell outside the compound, Alina Ward understood one unshakable truth. Expulsion had been the spark. The Blackhawk had been the ignition, and she was ready to fight the fire that followed. Alina Ward stood silently inside the compound, dust clinging to her uniform as operators moved like shadows around her. The Blackhawk had barely touched down when they transitioned from extraction to operation mode. Every movement, every gesture was deliberate, precise, rehearsed, lethal if needed. Alina had trained with elite units before, but this level of cohesion was something else entirely. It wasn't just training, it was instinct encoded through years of impossible missions. The team leader approached her, voice low, authoritative, and calm over the hum of electronics and distant rotor echoes. "Captain Ward, what you did was courageous, but it didn't just expose corruption, it made you a target. Some of the people behind this have influence inside the very military hierarchy that expelled you. If we fail, they'll retaliate, not just against you, but against the base you left and potentially multiple operations overseas." Alina's mind raced. She had always known that whistleblowing carried risk, but until now, the magnitude of it had only been theoretical. "So what's the plan?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. Inside, adrenaline sharpened her senses to a razor's edge. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in the cabin's light was a possible threat. The team leader gestured to the monitors lining the wall. Multiple screens showed real-time satellite feeds, convoy tracking, personnel rosters, and red dots blinking across regions she had once managed herself. Each dot represented a compromised shipment, a vulnerable location, or a person connected to the network of corruption she had uncovered. The scale was staggering. Her initial investigation had been local, focused on missing weapons from a single base. This was global. "You'll guide our insertion teams," he continued. "You know the supply lines better than anyone. Your job is to identify choke points, predict movements, and provide intel that will allow us to neutralize threats without tipping off others." Alina swallowed hard. Her training had always emphasized following orders, not leading operations outside her jurisdiction. But there was no time for hesitation. She glanced around the room, nodding the operators' focus. These were people who didn't wait for permission. They acted, and now she had to act with them seamlessly or risk disaster. The first operational team moved toward the exit. Alina followed under the supervision of a younger SEAL, a man with sharp eyes and controlled movements. He didn't introduce himself, and she didn't ask. That was standard here. Names and backgrounds were irrelevant. Actions and reliability mattered. Outside, the night had fallen, turning the desert into an expanse of shadows and uncertainty. The compound was silent, save for the faint hum of surveillance drones hovering above. Alina's boots crunched against the sand and gravel as they approached the staging area for deployment. Her duffel bag, still slung over her shoulder, felt heavier than it should. Inside was the drive containing evidence, the proof of corruption, the leverage against people who would kill to keep their secrets. A comm alert signaled the start of the operation. The team leader's voice came over the earpiece, clipped and precise. "Targets have been identified. Extraction points confirmed. Move quietly, act decisively. No mistakes." Alina nodded, even though no one could see her. Her heart pounded, a steady rhythm of fear and excitement. She was about to step into a reality she had only theorized about during long nights reviewing manifests and reports. The insertion point was a remote outpost, abandoned to the public eye but alive with illicit activity. Alina had memorized its layout from old logs, satellite images, and her own observations. She led the team silently, signaling adjustments, identifying potential choke points, and marking areas where guards were likely stationed. The operators responded instantly, moving with the kind of coordination that made her realize this was a machine, one in which she was now a critical cog. As they approached the perimeter, Alina's mind focused on every detail: fence height, camera angles, patrol routes, entry points. She whispered directions under her breath, and the operators adjusted seamlessly. A single misstep could compromise the mission, and the consequences would be immediate. The first guards appeared, moving toward the compound entrance. Alina froze, instinctively calculating distances, angles, and response times. The operators acted without hesitation, silenced weapons, precise movements, no noise. Within seconds, the threat was neutralized, leaving no trace except the faint rustle of clothing against sand. Alina's stomach tightened, not from fear, but from the realization that the people she was confronting were the same ones who had dismissed her concerns, hidden evidence, and endangered lives. Inside the compound, the team split, moving in overlapping sweeps. Alina guided them through corridors she had memorized from schematics she had obtained years earlier. Every door, every ventilation shaft, every shadowed corner was accounted for. The team's operators never spoke her name, never acknowledged her presence beyond tactical coordination, yet she felt a sense of belonging she hadn't anticipated. They reached a central room filled with crates, shipping manifests, and communication devices. Alina immediately recognized the discrepancies, the same patterns she had identified before her expulsion. Her heart quickened. She was seeing proof of her suspicions in real time. "Coordinates," she whispered, pointing to a crate marked incorrectly. "Shipment labeled as training supplies. Inside, high-grade rifles and ammunition diverted to unregistered convoys. Expect armed personnel nearby." The team leader nodded subtly, and two operators moved to secure the area. Alina observed quietly, noting movement, patterns, and weaknesses. The speed and precision of the operation left her breathless. These people didn't hesitate. They didn't argue. They acted. And in this moment, she realized that this mission, this operation, was bigger than any career setback she had experienced. Suddenly, a faint sound, a door creak almost imperceptible, alerted her. "Guards!" The team leader's eyes flicked toward her and she pointed subtly. Operators shifted positions, weapons trained. Within seconds, the intruders were subdued, unaware of the force that had descended upon them. Alina felt a rush of adrenaline, tempered by cold calculation. As the night wore on, the operation continued with relentless precision. Each target was identified, each threat neutralized. Alina's knowledge of the logistics system proved invaluable. She anticipated patrols, calculated entry points, and identified compromised personnel with uncanny accuracy. The operators responded instantly, moving like extensions of her own will. By the time the first phase of the mission concluded, the compound was secured. Evidence had been gathered, suspects contained, and the network's operations disrupted. Alina stood amid the chaos, breathing heavily, dust and sweat coating her uniform. She had been expelled hours earlier, dismissed as a troublemaker, and now she had led a critical portion of a covert military operation. The team leader approached, expression unreadable but approving. "Good work, Captain. Today, you proved why you're here. Your knowledge saved lives, prevented potential leaks, and ensured the success of the operation. Remember this feeling. It's not about rank. It's about competence and courage." Alina nodded, a mix of relief and grim satisfaction washing over her. She had survived the expulsion, and now she was indispensable. The night outside was quiet, but she knew it was temporary. The threats were still out there. The network of corruption was vast, and this operation was only the beginning. As the operators prepared for extraction, Alina allowed herself a moment to absorb what had happened. She had been tested, and she had passed. Her skills, her insight, and her courage had made the difference. And yet, she knew the real challenges were just ahead. The SEAL team moved with efficiency, securing the perimeter, preparing for the next phase. Alina followed, alert, aware, and ready. The desert night was unforgiving, but she had proven she could navigate its dangers. The first strike had been successful, but the mission was far from over. And as the Blackhawk lifted again, carrying them toward the next objective, Alina Ward understood something profound. Expulsion had been a spark. The fire had begun, and she was now at the center of it. Failure was no longer an option. The Blackhawk's engines hummed a low, relentless drone as it lifted off the desert compound, carrying Alina and the SEAL team toward the next target. Sweat still clung to her uniform. Her lungs burned from the night's exertion, and dust streaked her face, but she felt alive in a way that she hadn't for weeks. Expulsion had been a humiliation, but action, real, dangerous, decisive action, was a different kind of validation. Inside the cabin, the operators moved with silent precision. Gear was checked again, weapons cleaned and locked, eyes scanning the landscape below. Not one word was wasted. Alina watched them carefully, trying to absorb everything. Their hand signals, their communication patterns, the subtle shifts in posture that conveyed intent faster than speech ever could. In this environment, hesitation could be lethal. The team leader leaned toward her. "Captain Ward, you've seen part of the network, but not all of it. What you uncovered at the base was just the tip of the iceberg. The pipeline you exposed extends far beyond your previous assignments. Multiple shipments have been rerouted, personnel compromised, and critical intel deliberately obscured. Alina's stomach tightened. She had suspected that her initial investigation was more serious than anyone had admitted, but hearing it confirmed, and from operators trained to deal with threats at this level, made it visceral. She realized that her expulsion hadn't just been about silencing her. It had been about protecting the corrupt network from exposure. "Who's behind this?" she asked, voice low. "Is it just a few officers or—" The leader didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pointed to a tablet displaying satellite overlays of multiple bases, convoys, and storage depots. Red lines connected points she recognized from her manifests. Blue lines indicated secure channels. Her heart raced as the connections became clear. This wasn't negligence. It was deliberate, coordinated, systemic. "They are embedded at multiple levels," he finally said. "Some are military, some civilian contractors. They cover each other, falsify manifests, and move resources to private interests or hostile entities. The moment you were expelled, your absence allowed the network to operate without scrutiny. Your whistleblowing triggered alarm bells." Alina swallowed hard. Her mind flashed back to Major Collins, the base commander, the officers who had dismissed her reports. They weren't just incompetent, they were part of the problem. Her expulsion had been a calculated move to remove a threat. The Blackhawk banked sharply over rugged terrain, and she saw the next target approaching. A remote supply depot that had gone dark on official logs for months. Her pulse quickened. This was real. Too real. Lives depended on their actions. The team leader tapped the comms, issuing silent orders. The operators adjusted instantly, positioning themselves for a vertical insertion. Alina followed, heart pounding, gripping her harness as the rotors created a vortex of sand below. They touched down with controlled precision, landing just outside the depot's perimeter. Alina's senses were on fire. The wind carried the faint scent of diesel and chemicals. Shadows shifted. Somewhere in the complex, people were moving, unaware that they were being watched. Alina led the operators toward the entrance, pointing out choke points and blind spots she had memorized from satellite imagery and past reports. She guided them silently, noting the placement of surveillance cameras, guard shifts, and escape routes. Every detail mattered. One misstep could compromise the operation and their lives. Inside, the depot was a labyrinth of crates, forklifts, and stacked containers. Alina immediately recognized the patterns: mislabeling, rerouted shipments, falsified manifests. Her evidence from the encrypted drive had been accurate. The network's corruption ran deeper than she had imagined. A sudden noise, a heavy footstep on metal, made her freeze. She signaled operators with a subtle hand gesture. Weapons raised, the team moved toward the sound. 2 guards appeared, weapons drawn. In a heartbeat, the operators neutralized them silently, leaving no trace, no alert. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the stakes. Every guard, every employee, every corrupted officer could be lethal if mishandled. "Keep moving," the leader whispered. "Time is critical. Extraction teams are en route, but we must secure evidence first." They moved deeper into the depot. Alina's eyes scanned labels, manifests, and shipping logs. One crate stood out, marked innocuously as training supplies but containing high-grade rifles and ammunition. She signaled to the lead operator, who nodded, and the crate was secured. Suddenly, a door slammed somewhere in the complex. Alina's stomach dropped. They weren't alone. Comms crackled with urgent warnings. Reinforcements, hostile elements were converging on the depot. The network was responding. The SEAL operators adjusted their positions instantly, weapons trained, eyes scanning for threats. Alina realized that this was no longer just a mission to contain evidence. It had become a fight for survival. The leader approached her again. "Captain Ward, we need your insight. These shipments were rerouted according to specific patterns you've already studied. Predict their next move, or they'll escape before we can intercept." Alina's mind raced. She analyzed the manifests in seconds, mapping likely routes based on past behavior. They'll move through the southern access road. It's less monitored at night. Convoy of 2 trucks. ETA 10 minutes. The team leader's eyes narrowed. Good. Operators prepare intercept. Captain Ward, you coordinate comms. Keep them updated in real time. The next 10 minutes were a blur of activity. Alina's heart pounded, her mind calculating every variable. The convoy approached as predicted. Operators moved with deadly efficiency, securing the vehicles and detaining personnel without firing a shot. Evidence was collected, shipments accounted for, and the network's flow disrupted, at least temporarily. As the Blackhawk extracted them from the depot, Alina allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. She had been expelled hours earlier, and now she had led a critical part of an operation that had exposed multiple corrupt actors. But there was no time for celebration. The team leader's expression remained stern. This was just the beginning. The network extends further. We've only scratched the surface. And Captain, the people behind this will retaliate. They are dangerous, organized, and deeply embedded. Alina's mind raced. She had survived expulsion, faced skepticism, and now operated in the shadow world of covert operations. Each step forward revealed a deeper layer of corruption, a more dangerous adversary. She realized that the risks were higher than she had ever imagined, and the cost of failure was immediate and lethal. As the Blackhawk lifted once more, carrying them away from the depot, Alina gazed out at the desert night below. Her pulse slowly returned to a steady rhythm, but the adrenaline remained. She had witnessed the network's reach, participated in its disruption, and survived her first real encounter with the forces she had inadvertently exposed. The team leader spoke over comms. Captain Ward, this mission is far from over. Every shipment, every person, every compromised officer must be addressed. We move at night, strike quickly, and leave no trace. The operation depends on precision, and the stakes are higher than you realize. Alina's stomach tightened, a mix of fear and resolve. She had been expelled, dismissed, and underestimated. Now she was indispensable, guiding a team of elite operators through a network of corruption that threatened lives and missions across the globe. She allowed herself a moment of clarity. Expulsion had not ended her career. It had launched her into something far bigger, far more dangerous, and far more consequential. And as the Blackhawk cut through the desert night, Alina Ward understood a truth she had long suspected. Survival depended not on rank, but on knowledge, courage, and the ability to act when others hesitated. Failure was no longer an option. The next phase of the operation awaited. The Blackhawk's rotors churned the desert night air as it carried Alina Ward and the SEAL team away from the depot, leaving behind a trail of chaos and disruption. Inside, the cabin was tense but controlled. Operators moved like clockwork, their eyes scanning monitors, checking equipment, and maintaining silent communication. Alina's mind was still racing from the encounter, the weight of what they had achieved, and the danger that still lurked, settling like a stone in her chest. The team leader crouched beside her. Captain Ward, containment was successful, but we are far from done. The network you uncovered extends across multiple regions, and those involved have influence that reaches into senior command structures. Some are military, some are civilian contractors, some, he paused, letting the words sink in, are people who will do anything to protect themselves. Alina swallowed hard, gripping her duffel bag that contained the encrypted drive. Her pulse raced, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. For hours, she had moved seamlessly between intelligence, reconnaissance, and operational coordination. But now, with the immediate threat momentarily neutralized, the enormity of the situation hit her. She had been expelled, dismissed, and yet here she was, operating at a level of military secrecy she had never imagined. "Why me?" she asked quietly, though she already knew the answer. Her knowledge of supply lines, manifests, and personnel movements was precise, unmatched. Without her insight, the network would have continued to operate undisturbed. But the answer carried an unspoken weight. The higher-ups trusted her, or at least they trusted the data she had uncovered. The team leader's expression was grave. Because you saw it, you acted. Most officers would have turned a blind eye. You didn't. That's why you're still here. Alina nodded. She had always known her actions carried risk, but she hadn't anticipated the magnitude. The SEAL operators around her, silent and professional, had taken her presence as a given, but in reality, her life had become intertwined with the mission's success. One mistake, one miscalculation, and it could all unravel. The Blackhawk banked over a ridge, revealing the next operational staging area. It was an unmarked airfield, isolated, with reinforced fencing and camouflage structures. No flags, no signage, no indication that this was anything other than a nondescript installation. But Alina could feel the tension radiating from it. This was where the operation would escalate. Inside the airfield's secure command center, analysts, officers, and special operators worked in silence, coordinating movements, cross-referencing intelligence, and updating strike plans. Screens displayed real-time satellite imagery, convoy locations, and personnel data. Red dots pulsed across the map, each one representing a threat, a compromised shipment, or a key figure in the network Alina had exposed. A general entered the room, flanked by aides. He was unassuming in appearance, but Alina recognized the authority in his presence. He scanned the room, then fixed his gaze on her. "Captain Ward," he said, voice steady, commanding attention without raising it. "Your actions have disrupted a significant network of corruption. The information you provided was accurate and actionable. Because of your initiative, we were able to prevent weapons from reaching hostile hands." Alina felt a mix of pride and disbelief. The same military system that had expelled her hours ago was now validating her actions at the highest level. It was surreal. The general continued, "However, your expulsion will remain on record. Officially, it was for insubordination. Unofficially, your career is now aligned with this operation. You will be reinstated and promoted within a special task force, effective immediately. But understand this, your work will not be public. There will be no medals, no recognition outside this circle. Your success is silent and your safety depends on it." Alina's stomach tightened. She had always valued duty over recognition, but the reality of operating in shadows, unseen and unacknowledged, was sobering. This was a new kind of warfare, bureaucratic, covert, and lethal in its own way. A senior analyst approached, handing her a tablet displaying decrypted manifests from the encrypted drive. "Captain, we need your expertise to map out the remaining network. Identify choke points, weak links, and critical personnel. Every second counts. The longer we wait, the higher the risk of retaliation or escape." Alina studied the data. Her mind worked at lightning speed, cross-referencing her prior knowledge with the intelligence on screen. She traced routes, pinpointed compromised supply lines, and flagged personnel whose loyalty was questionable. Each calculation carried consequences. Every recommendation could save lives or expose the team to danger. The team leader crouched beside her again, glancing at the tablet. "Your insight is invaluable. We trust your judgment. Guide the operation and we'll handle the execution." Hours passed in intense, focused activity. Alina's calculations directed the placement of intercept teams, extraction units, and surveillance drones. Convoys were rerouted, compromised personnel detained, and shipments secured before they could leave staging areas. Each success was immediate but invisible to the outside world, a shadow war fought without headlines, without acknowledgement. Suddenly, a comm alert signaled an anomaly. One of the convoys they had intercepted earlier was moving unexpectedly. Alina's heart raced. The network was adapting. Someone had discovered a breach. The stakes had just doubled. Operators adjusted positions, weapons ready, eyes scanning every angle. Alina analyzed the situation rapidly, recalculating likely routes and predicting the next move. She directed intercept teams with precise instructions, ensuring containment without alerting the perpetrators. Every second counted. Every decision mattered. The convoys were stopped, evidence secured, and personnel detained. The operation had prevented what could have been a catastrophic leak of military resources. Alina's calculations had saved lives, preserved critical assets, and maintained operational security. As the night wore on, Alina finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. The tension in her body was palpable, a mixture of exhaustion, adrenaline, and relief. She had been expelled, dismissed, and yet here she was, leading critical aspects of a covert military operation, proving her value in ways that no rank or commendation could measure. The general returned, flanked by aides. He nodded at her subtly, acknowledging her contribution without ceremony. "Captain Ward, your work tonight has disrupted a significant threat. The operation is ongoing, but your guidance ensured success at the most critical stage." Alina nodded, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. She had expected humiliation, dismissal, and perhaps even retaliation for speaking out. Instead, she had been validated in the most consequential way possible, through action, through results, through survival. The team leader approached her one final time that night. "Captain, you've proven your worth, but understand this. The people behind this network will not stop. They are resourceful, dangerous, and willing to go to any lengths to protect themselves. Our work is far from finished." Alina's mind cleared, resolve hardening. She had faced expulsion, bureaucratic obstacles, and skepticism. Now she was operating in shadows, invisible to the world but essential to its safety. Every skill, every instinct, every ounce of courage mattered. She looked out the window at the desert night, dark and endless, knowing the fight was far from over. But for the first time since her expulsion, she felt in control. She was no longer a dismissed officer. She was a critical agent in a shadow war, fighting for justice in a system that preferred secrecy to recognition. The Blackhawk lifted once more, engines humming a steady rhythm. Alina Ward tightened her grip on the tablet, reviewing data, planning the next phase. She had survived expulsion, navigated the first wave of operations, and proven her value beyond any doubt. But she also knew this. The higher she climbed in this shadowed hierarchy, the greater the danger. The people behind the network were still out there, watching, waiting. Any misstep could be fatal. As the aircraft cut through the night sky, Alina allowed herself a single thought. Justice in the shadows was a hard, unforgiving path, but it was one she was ready to walk. Expulsion had been only the beginning. Survival, action, and truth were the next stages, and Alina Ward was ready for all of them. Alina Ward stared at the desert below from the open side of the Blackhawk, night wind whipping her hair and sand particles stinging her face. She had learned to read the world in patterns, rotations of guards, shipment manifests, flight schedules, supply chains. Tonight, every pattern was alive and dangerous. The network she had exposed was no longer abstract. Its members were aware, and she knew instinctively they would strike back. The team leader's voice came over her earpiece, clipped, efficient. "Eyes on the next insertion point. Multiple hostile targets. Expect armed personnel, high alert. Captain Ward, your insight is critical. Anticipate movement, direct teams, and minimize exposure." Alina nodded, even though no one could see her. Her pulse raced, not from fear but from focus. Every second now counted. One misstep, one wrong call, and lives, including hers, could be lost. The staging area came into view. A remote supply depot, half buried in rocky outcroppings, unmarked, almost invisible from satellite imagery. Yet Alina had memorized its layout from past reports, using every anomaly in manifests and movement patterns to predict where critical shipments would be stored. "Observe," she whispered, pointing to shadows flitting across the perimeter. 2 guards at the north entrance, rotation every 15 minutes. Surveillance cameras sweep the yard every 30. Inside, high-value crates are stacked in Zone C, likely containing weapons diverted from our previous intercept. Operators responded without hesitation, repositioning silently. Alina guided them through every blind spot, every corridor, every gap in security coverage. For hours, she had acted as strategist, intelligence officer, and mission coordinator. Now, the mission became real in ways she hadn't anticipated. Hostiles were awake, active, and aware of the previous disruption. Suddenly, movement on the far edge of the depot caught her attention. Vehicles approaching, unmarked, headlights off but engines audible to those who knew where to listen. A convoy, likely part of the network she had disrupted earlier. Her stomach tightened. They had adapted quickly. "Convoy inbound," she said calmly, but inside her mind raced. She recalculated intercept points, potential escape routes, choke points. The operators responded instantly, taking positions without hesitation, weapons ready. The first vehicles entered the perimeter. Alina guided the team leader to direct intercept teams with surgical precision. The convoy slowed, suspicious of the sudden shadows, but operators were in position, unseen, silent, ready. In seconds, the first vehicles were neutralized, engines cut, doors secured, personnel contained without gunfire. The network had underestimated their precision. But the victory was fleeting. From the darkness, an unexpected shot rang out. A high-caliber round ricocheted near her feet, sending a plume of sand into the night air. Alina's heart skipped. They had been prepared for guards and convoys, but not for an active sniper. Someone had anticipated their move. The team leader barked orders. Operators moved to suppress the threat, scanning every shadow. Alina instinctively pulled low, scanning angles, estimating trajectories. This was no longer just strategy. This was survival. "Captain Ward, eyes on the northeast ridge," one operator shouted. Alina followed and saw the glint of a sniper scope. She quickly calculated range, distance, and cover. A plan formed instantly in her mind. She directed a small team to flank, using terrain as cover while another group provided distraction. Seconds later, the threat was neutralized. A man, trained and lethal, now restrained, eyes wide with disbelief. Alina exhaled slowly, adrenaline pumping, but she knew this was only the beginning. The network had layers, embedded personnel, and contingencies she hadn't anticipated. Every successful intercept painted a target on their backs. Inside the depot, Alina led operators through corridors she had predicted would contain high-value shipments. Every door, every crate, every entry point had been memorized. Yet, despite her planning, tension was tangible. Each corner could conceal danger. Each crate could hide traps or hostile personnel. Her duffel bag remained at her side, carrying the encrypted drive, the evidence of corruption, the proof that had sparked all of this. Operators had warned her to secure it, yet she found herself constantly scanning, calculating risks. It was a lifeline, a tool, and a liability all at once. A sudden calm alert broke the tense silence. Another convoy was attempting to reroute through a side access road she hadn't predicted. Her heart raced. The network was adapting, dynamic, dangerous. "Alina, what's your call?" the team leader asked over comms. She quickly analyzed terrain, speed, and personnel. Interception at the canyon junction. 2 units to block escape. 1 unit to secure vehicles. Expect hostiles armed and desperate. The team moved, precision synchronized with her calculations. The convoy entered the canyon, thinking it safe, only to find escape routes cut off. Operators moved in silently, restraining personnel, securing shipments. It was textbook execution. Yet Alina knew this was temporary. An adaptive enemy could regroup, strike back, or escalate. As they completed containment, Alina felt a shift in the air, a subtle presence. Someone watching, someone inside their operation. She scanned the perimeter. Nothing. Yet instinct screamed at her. The network had insiders embedded. They were compromised at a level higher than she had imagined. The team leader approached quietly. "Captain Ward, you were right to sense it. We've been compromised. Not from outside. From within, some of the people who facilitated the pipeline may have access to this mission's details. Alina's stomach twisted. Betrayal. Corruption embedded so deeply that even this covert operation wasn't immune. The thought sent a chill through her. Every move, every instruction, every calculation had to assume someone was watching. "Then we adjust," she said firmly. "We operate under the assumption that information leaks exist. Split teams, encrypted comms, staggered movements. Every decision we make must account for the possibility of betrayal." The Blackhawk's rotors hummed in the distance. Extraction was imminent, but Alina knew leaving now didn't guarantee safety. The network was learning. They adapted quickly, ruthlessly, and she had just made herself a primary target. Operators secured the depot, evidence cataloged, and personnel contained. Alina checked manifests, cross-referenced shipments, and ensured nothing had been missed. Precision, accuracy, survival, that was the rhythm of this new reality. As the Blackhawk landed, engines slicing through the night, Alina allowed herself a brief glance back at the depot. Chaos had been contained, threats neutralized, evidence secured, but she knew it was temporary. The network was still active, adaptive, dangerous. Her duffel remained close, the encrypted drive intact. She felt a strange mixture of pride, fear, and determination. Expulsion had been the spark. Her insight had ignited action. But now, survival required more than intelligence. It required courage, precision, and constant vigilance. The team leader leaned close. "Captain, tonight proved one thing: you belong in this fight. But remember, the enemy you can't see is the most dangerous of all. Stay sharp." Alina nodded, heart still racing. Shadows of the night pressed in around them. She had survived expulsion, deception, and direct confrontation. But the true battle, against those who hid in plain sight, manipulating systems, controlling resources, and undermining trust, had only just begun. As the Blackhawk lifted again, the desert stretching endlessly below, Alina Ward understood a profound truth. In the shadows, justice required vigilance, courage, and the willingness to face enemies who might never announce themselves. And she was ready. The Blackhawk's engines thrummed a steady, urgent rhythm as it cut across the desert night, carrying Alina Ward and the SEAL team toward the final objective. Exhaustion pressed on her body, yet her mind was sharper than ever. Months of investigation, hours of covert operations, and the constant shadow of betrayal had brought her to this moment. The network she had uncovered, the corruption that had expelled her, the very people who had tried to erase her career, all of it had led to this confrontation. The team leader crouched beside her, voice calm, precise, and deadly serious. "Captain Ward, this is it, the central hub, the command and storage facility coordinating the pipeline. Once we move in, there is no turning back. High-value personnel, armed operatives, and evidence are all inside. One wrong move, and everything we've worked for could collapse." Alina's stomach tightened. She had faced danger before, but never on this scale. The hub represented not just shipments and personnel, but the nerve center of corruption embedded in the military and contractors alike. The people inside would fight to protect it, and they had the resources, training, and ruthlessness to make this operation lethal. "I understand," she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We move carefully, neutralize threats, and secure evidence. Every decision counts." The Blackhawk descended into the vicinity of the hub, careful to stay just beyond the range of visual detection. Alina surveyed the perimeter from her vantage point: reinforced fences, motion sensors, guard rotations, and surveillance cameras. Her mind worked instantly, cataloging vulnerabilities, blind spots, and optimal insertion points. Operators moved into position, silent and lethal. Alina guided them, pointing out choke points, routes for extraction, and areas likely to contain high-value targets. Each suggestion came from a combination of intelligence analysis and instinct honed through months of high-stakes operations. The team leader tapped her shoulder lightly. Captain Ward, you're cleared to enter with us. Your insight is critical. No hesitation. Alina nodded and stepped off the Blackhawk, boots hitting the rocky desert ground with a quiet determination. They moved toward the hub under the cover of darkness, shadows blending with shadows. The operators were seamless, coordinated, and deadly. Alina followed, calculating each movement, each potential threat. Inside the hub, the air was tense. Computers hummed, monitors glowed, and personnel moved with urgency. Alina immediately identified compromised manifests, falsified logs, and unguarded exits. Every detail she had studied before her expulsion now became actionable intelligence in real time. Team A, secure the north corridor, she whispered, pointing. Team B, cover the south exit. Zone C contains high-value crates, priority containment. Lead analyst, prepare for data extraction. Move fast. The operation was a blur of precise movements. Operators neutralized threats silently when possible, weapons trained, eyes sharp. Alina guided teams through corridors, pointing out weak spots, anticipating responses from hostile personnel. Every step was calculated, every decision a matter of survival. Then it happened. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man in uniform she recognized instantly. Major Collins, the man who had dismissed her, humiliated her, and expunged her from the records of the base. His presence confirmed Alina's worst fears. The corruption went to the highest levels of the chain of command. Collins' eyes widened as he saw her. You shouldn't be here," he said, voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and fear. Alina's pulse surged. "You were wrong, Collins. You underestimated me. And now the network you protected is finished." Collins moved toward a hidden panic button, but Alina reacted instantly. "Now!" she shouted. Operators surged, restraining him before he could alert anyone. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Shots rang out elsewhere in the hub, but operators suppressed them quickly. Alina directed movements, ensuring every hostile target was neutralized and every high-value shipment secured. Her mind moved faster than the chaos around her, calculating angles, predicting actions, and securing evidence. Minutes later, the hub was under control. Hostile operatives were contained, shipments secured, and critical data extracted. Alina stood in the center of the command room, breathing heavily, her uniform streaked with dust and sweat. She had survived expulsion, months of isolation, and hours of lethal operations, and now she had confronted the very person responsible for her dismissal. The team leader approached, eyes sharp. "Captain Ward, the operation is complete, evidence secured, corruption disrupted. You've proven not just your capability but your necessity." Alina exhaled slowly. Relief mixed with exhaustion, but a quiet sense of triumph settled over her. She glanced at the captured personnel, the seized shipments, the decrypted data, all proof of the corruption that had nearly escaped unchecked. The general appeared, flanked by aides. He nodded at her, a rare moment of acknowledgement. "Captain Ward, your actions have neutralized a significant threat. The evidence will ensure accountability and your reinstatement is confirmed. Your career and the lives you've protected owes you more than words can express." Alina's lips tightened into a small, sharp smile. Expulsion had seemed like an end, but it had been a catalyst, a spark that propelled her into action. She had been dismissed, underestimated, and yet here she stood, vindicated, operationally essential and alive. The team prepared for extraction, the Blackhawk waiting to lift them from the desert. Alina secured the encrypted drive, ensuring that every detail of the operation was intact. She had faced betrayal, danger, and skepticism, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. As the rotors lifted them into the night sky, Alina looked back at the hub. Shadows of the past lingered there, corruption disrupted, but vigilance required. She understood that this mission, though successful, was only one battle in a larger war. The team leader leaned close, voice low but firm. "Captain Ward, you've proven something tonight. Rank, protocol, and expulsion mean nothing when courage, intelligence, and resolve are put to the test. Remember that. You are now officially part of the Black Viper Task Force. Welcome to the team. Elena allowed herself a single nod. Black Viper, the name she had heard whispered earlier, now confirmed. She was no longer just an expelled officer. She was part of something greater, operating in shadows, fighting for justice where bureaucracy and corruption had failed. Below, the desert stretched endlessly, dark and silent. Above, stars glimmered, indifferent to human struggles, yet somehow watching. Elena felt a strange serenity amid the exhaustion. She had survived, acted decisively, and confronted the very people who had tried to destroy her career. And she knew this. Expulsion had been a spark. Action had been the fire. Survival, courage, and intelligence had forged a path through darkness. Elena Ward tightened her grip on the encrypted drive, eyes fixed ahead. The Blackhawk hummed a steady rhythm, carrying them toward the next mission, toward the future, toward justice in a system that rarely acknowledged it. For the first time in hours, she allowed
La
herself to
classe non
smile.
classa, perfetto.
They had
Comunque
tried
nella
to
scuola non
silence
manca, per
her.
niente. Per
They had
niente. Ma che
failed,
schifo andare a scuola il sabato. In
and
realtà non è
now she
male
was
dire. In
unstoppable.
realtà non è male, sono d'accordo con Zar. Cioè, tra tutta la settimana io preferivo andare a scuola il sabato o andare a scuola quando gli altri erano in gita, perché sei in pochi e scopri anche un po' l'umanità dei professori, sei più vicino. Molto spesso, dato che non c'è abbastanza gente per fare il programma, cazzeggiano,